all things through Christ who strengthens me.
You know, I thought about just telling you to stay standing like entry, and I'd sit down, but y'all can have a seat, but you already have. Also, I got kind of worried. I thought, am I even supposed to preach this morning? I haven't seen it announced anywhere, so maybe they were keeping it a secret. But no, I really appreciate Mitch asking me. I love the opportunity to speak. You know, I deal daily with a bunch of 16 to 18-year-olds, 15 to 18-year-olds. And it's amazing to watch. I think it's almost the most raw expression of humanity to watch that age group as they try to figure out life and how to navigate social circumstances, expectations, hopes, the future. As we get older, I think we find ways to justify what we think and what we want and what we do. But with that age group, you see a lot of just raw emotion in what they want. And one thing that I've noticed is this search continually to feel good, to have what they want, to find something that makes them feel good. And I know I did a lesson a few months ago here about the search for happiness and contrasting happiness with contentment, and I just want to kind of piggyback on that this morning. Finding contentment in a world of anxiety and expectations. Because that's one thing about that age group. I remember the most anxiety I think I've ever felt in my life was my senior year of high school. Applying for colleges, figuring out where I was going to go. I remember my mother staying up till 11, 12, 1 o'clock looking for scholarships. And then, here, fill these out. And then I would get so anxious about filling them out. Am I even going to get it? Am I applying for this scholarship that I'll never see any benefit from? Am I wasting my time? And the anxiety of things that I couldn't control in that situation. And then the expectations that came along with that of I have to live up to this expectation that my parents have for me, my community has for me. There's a lot in that time period of life, but it doesn't go away. I think we see it continually and continually. And as Davis just read, Philippians 4:11 through 13, I think Paul summarizes, and I can sit down after this because this is all we're going to do is read this right here. Not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatsoever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low. I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So what had Paul experienced? I think the kids here know it really well after VBS. We can look at here in 2 Corinthians, I didn't even put the chapter, verses 24 through 28. 5 times I have received at the hands of the Jews 40 lashes less one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea. On frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, from robbers, dangers from my own people, dangers from Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers, in toil and hardship, through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. And apart from other things, there is the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. In all that he experienced, the highs, the lows, the anxiety of taking care of God's people and preaching and teaching to them. Paul felt this anxiety too. He felt this pressure. He saw these expectations that were placed on him. So let's kind of go through a little bit about this. So what is contentment? Well, we're going to use basically 3 books and then contrast it with the New Testament. So we're going to look at Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. So the Bible's kind of a library. You have 43% or so that is narrative. That's a story. That would be the Gospels. That would be Genesis, Exodus. But 33% poetry. And these poets, this series of poetry is to help us learn God's Word, to learn how to act. And all 3 of these books can fall into that category. Job with a little bit of narrative too. And then 24%, mostly the New Testament, is correspondence and letters. So let's look at discontentment. First of all, we need to know what contentment is. And I like to say to contrast that with happiness, because very often we think of them in the same way. We think of them being very similar, but the way I'm going to put it here is contentment is wanting what you have. Happiness is getting what you want. And how much of the time do we focus on getting what we want? If I just had this thing, then I would be happy. If I just achieved this, then I would be satisfied. If I just make this much money, then I'll feel okay. How much of our time do we spend focusing on figuring out what we want and how to get it, instead of being grateful and thankful for what the Lord has blessed us with. Because we can only control one of those things. One of these is internal and one of them is external. Which one of these can you control? It's only one of them. You can only control your contentment. You can't control the things that happen to you. And like I said, I think there's really two things that stand out that prevent this contentment, and those are expectations and anxiety. So let's look at expectations, first of all, through the lens of Proverbs. I'm just going to quickly, briefly summarize these because we don't have time to turn to all of them, or we'll be here all morning. So in chapter 1, we see the enticement of short-term gain. We see how we're told not to search for that woman or for that thing that's out there looming for us. We're not to look for evil. We're not to look for things that we think we want. We don't want to focus on that. Chapter 2, we look at wisdom within reason to rise above our own expectations. And we will turn to chapter 2 there, Proverbs 2, verses 2 through 8. Making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. And yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, you will seek it like silver and search for it like hidden treasure. Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom from his mouth, and comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is like a shield to those who walk with integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints. God shows us here not to seek things to make us happy, but to seek his truth and his wisdom. And then in chapter 3, if you'll move down a little bit more, we'll look at verses 5 and 6. Because it's not for us to lean on our own understanding, but to listen to the Lord's. And in verse 5, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. We have to, as I said, avoid enticement. And skipping down to chapter 5, verses 7 and 8. And now, O sons, listen to me, and do not depart from my words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house, lest you will give honor to others, and lest your years be merciless. We don't want to stray towards seeking things that we think that will make us happy. Chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, office, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will become upon your house like a robber, and want like an armed man. This is what I deal with about 4 periods a day. Students who are more concerned with not doing what they don't want to do in that class than the outcome of what they wish they had. They're so concerned with, I just want to watch this YouTube video. I just want to play my game. I just want to talk to my friend, that they can't think beyond what they want in that moment. We've got to make sure that we're thinking long term. We have to have something to focus on. We have to have a goal that we're striving toward. And then in chapter 12, verse 1. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid. And that's from the ESV. No one likes to be corrected. I got observed this week at school. It makes you real uncomfortable when a principal walks in with their iPad and just starts taking notes on everything you're saying. I don't want to feel like I did something wrong. I don't want to be told that I did something wrong. But if I look at that feedback and I say, I don't appreciate that, I don't agree with that feedback, that's no good, then I can't grow from that. I need to be able to look at the feedback I was given and look at it from the perspective I was given from and figure out how I can incorporate that or how it can benefit me. And if it can't benefit me, then I need to realize that that's all they saw and that's all they had to do. But in any situation, you can look for a way to improve without focusing on being upset or hurt by the fact that you're being corrected in some way. And Jesus continues this in the New Testament too. We see in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 7:24-29. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who builds his house upon the rock. And the rains fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on the house, but it did not fall because it had been found on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who builds his house on the sand. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat against the house and it fell, and great was the fall of it. If we're building our hopes on ourselves or what we want, then we're building it on fool's gold. There's nothing there. Verse 28, and when Jesus had finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching as one who had authority and not as their scribes. Jesus is that solid foundation. He is where we should focus our attention. So what are some things that we can do to overcome our own expectations? First of all, we have to say no a lot. We have to be willing to say no to that woman of folly through Proverbs. We have to be able to see situations and just decide not to follow that path. But then on the other side, sometimes we have to ask for help. And for me, this is really hard to do. I feel like I should be able to handle stuff, and if I can't handle it, then it's a failure of my own. But I've got to be willing, and we all have to be willing to ask for help. We have to bear one another's burdens, as Galatians 6, verses 1-5 says. We also have to remember that we possess nothing. These things that we strive for, these titles, these material blessings, they're not ours. God's given them to us. We don't own them. We don't hold claim to them. Proverbs 13:11 says, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase. So often I'll have a kid come and tell me, you gave me a 0. And I said, I didn't give you a 0. You didn't do the assignment. You haven't done anything. They want me to put a grade in the grade book that they haven't done anything for. There's no value in that. And here's my soapbox for a minute as a teacher. I go through about 750 pencils a year. Now, as a kid, I had a little metal pencil box that's still in my parents' basement 25 years later that I carried from 6th grade through 12th grade. Every year, beginning of the year, I'd get pencils, and it would be the Eastern Conference NBA teams or the Western Conference NBA teams. And I would use them, and I knew exactly how much had been sharpened of each one of them, and I kept them, and I kept track. And one time a kid stole it in 4th grade, and I still remember that. And I knew it because I was able to tell the teacher exactly which team it was. It was the Vancouver Grizzlies. I knew those were my only pencils I was getting for the year. I wasn't getting any more pencils. I was responsible for those. So I kept track of them. I have 750 pencils going through in my room every year because I supply them. The kids go grab it, and when they're done, they break it in half and throw it in the floor. I don't know why that's what they do, but that's what they do. Or they break the eraser off and throw it in the floor. Wealth hastily gained will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase. They don't value things that are given to them. Do we do that with our salvation sometimes? Do we take it for granted? Do we look at it as, I didn't have to do much for it, I'm not worried about it? Because really it comes down to what's our focus. So focus is an interesting thing. I wish I could play the video, but I haven't figured out a way to get the video to play. I hope everybody sees the gorilla in the middle of this picture. This was a very interesting experiment done about attention. So they played this video to individuals, and they said, I want you to count how many times the basketball is passed. So they primed them all. They told them ahead of time, I want you to count how many passes you see of this basketball. And so at the end of the video, they could all tell it was like 12 passes. I don't remember how many it was. And then the researcher would just say, hey, by the way, did you notice the gorilla walk through the middle of the screen? And I can't remember if it was the majority or almost all, but they said, what gorilla? And in the video, he walks through there, stops halfway, waves at the camera, and walks off. But most people never even notice the man in the gorilla suit because they're so busy focused on the basketball being passed. Our attention will change our lives. It will guide us. It will direct what we do, what we think, and how we act. So what does the world focus on? From my observations in a classroom, it is self. Every day, I watch kids focused on what somebody said to them, how someone disrespected them, how they feel about something because of they're worried about themselves. So what happens when we focus on self? One of my favorite quotes that I've heard over the past 2 or 3 years is Dr. Jordan Peterson says, self-consciousness is technically indistinguishable from pain and anxiety. What he said is, when we are focused on ourselves and we're worried about how we appear to others, how we're worried about how we come across to others, if you put somebody in an fMRI and you look at their brain scans, it shows the same way as pain and anxiety. When we think about ourselves and what we're receiving, what we're getting, it's the same as pain and anxiety. So let's look at anxiety and the focus on self through the lens of Ecclesiastes. So Proverbs, that was going to be a lot of it from Solomon when he was a younger man, and now we're looking at Solomon as an older man here. Chapter 2, he goes through this entire list of pursuits that he tried. He tried everything for gratification. He built things. He tried to make his name great. He tried to satisfy himself with singers and entertainment and gardens and beauty and food and anything that he could think of to make himself happy. And in the end, he found that none of it did. Let's just turn there and look at it real quick. Verses 9 through 11 at least. Then I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. All that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not restrain my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all my labor, even taking pride in what he had done right there. And in this way was my reward for all my labor. So I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was futility, striving after the wind, and there was no benefit under the sun. Throughout the rest of Ecclesiastes, we see that he says that we should focus on God in chapter 5. In chapter 7, he shows that God had made the good days and the bad. Because the things that happen to us, they're out of our control. Even if there's something of our own making, once we've set the wheels in motion for that, we can't change it once the wheels are set in motion. In chapter 8, he says that man cannot know God's ways. And boy, I'm glad, because if I had that much responsibility and that much on my mind, I think I'd go crazy. And then chapter 12, he sums it up in verses 9 through 13, and we will turn there and read it briefly. Ecclesiastes 12, verses 9 through 13. Besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads and like nails, firmly fixed in the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. My son, beware anything beyond these. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness to the flesh. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. That's how he sums it up. You can spend all of your time trying to study to be just right. You can spend all of your time trying to optimize and maximize and get every bit of everything out if you can of what you do. But at the end of the day, fear God and keep his commandments. So where should our focus be? Hebrews 12, 1 through 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. So don't focus on those things that are clinging to us. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Looking to who? Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. That's where our focus should be. And this is one of the greater thinkers of the last few years on just maximization and optimization. He's a Hungarian. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And some of his work has really moved into education in the last few years. But one of his quotes, or he has an idea called flow. So the people who are at the top end of their field, so the greatest basketball players in the world, the greatest musicians in the world, he has studied them. He passed away a few years ago. He had studied them for a long time. And at a certain point, you get into a rhythm, and I'm sure some of you have done this in your hobbies, in your job or something, where you get into this state where you're not thinking anymore, you're just doing. And it's just exhilarating. You're just going full speed at the peak of your ability, and it's just one of the best feelings in the world. And he calls that flow. He said the best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, or relaxing times. The best moments usually occur if a person's body or mind is stretched to its limit in a voluntary, the key word there is voluntary, effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. It's not about getting something. It's not about receiving what you want. It's about giving your all in the utmost pursuit. And I think that's a great summary of what the Christian life is. It is giving our all in the utmost pursuit of living like Jesus. Because as Paul said in Galatians 2, for through the law I died to the law, so that I might live to God. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ through me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. It's this that we're called to be like. We're not to live for ourselves anymore. We're called to live as Christ did, a continual sacrifice for others. And then going back to the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6, verses 25 through 34. If we focus on ourselves, we don't accomplish much. In verse 25, Jesus says, don't worry about your food or clothing. And how much of the time is that what we're focused on? In 26, he said, God cares for the animals, but we're definitely more important than they are. And in verse 27, how much does worrying actually benefit a situation? What is it, like 92% of all worrying done doesn't come to fruition? And then he compares who we've been talking to this whole time in verses 28 through 30. Solomon couldn't compare to the beauty that God puts into this world. God will provide for us where others have no assurance. And if we seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all these things will be added to us. So don't worry about the future, but take care of the matters that are at hand. So what are a few things that we can do to overcome our anxiety? Number one, don't compare yourself to other people. If we're always focused on what someone else has, it's going to steal our joy. If we always want to equal somebody else, if we always want to beat somebody else, that's what we'll spend our time focused on. Matthew 7, 1 through 3, it's the example of the speck and the beam. If we're looking for problems in other people to make ourselves feel good, that's not the answer either. Or in Luke 18, verses 9 through 14, we see the publican in the Pharisee's prayer. The Pharisee thought he was really something because he'd done all these things and he could say all these things about how great he was and how much he tithed and all this. But he wasn't justified as that publican who beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Another thing we can do is focus on what we can control. Ephesians 4:26 says, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. We can't help what we feel sometimes. Emotions can overcome us. But it's our responsibility to have control over our actions. It's our responsibility to have self-control. Also, we need to value our time more than money. Don't lay up your treasures where treasure is. That's where your heart will be also. And in Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to those who are called according to his purpose. We can find something to take away positive from any situation, no matter how bad. So again, where should our focus be? We said Christ. But as we've also said in Colossians 3:2, he says, set your minds on things that are above, not on things of this earth. If we're worried about this world, then we'll worry ourselves to death. Because we've got to be searching for the goal. I think Job shows us what the goal should be, which is faith. So we all know the story of Job. Job suffers a great loss, but he's blameless. He's not done anything wrong. He's righteous, and he honors God. So when he has all these bad things befall him, his family, his children are all killed, his livestock and everything stolen, and house burns down, and everything's gone. his friends come to console him. But he argues with his friends about the balance of God's action and justice. Then finally, God answers him from a whirlwind, and God questions Job about his standing within the universe. God explains that Job cannot see the whole picture of the universe. And God explains that Job must trust in God with this realization. How many times do we think we understand a situation and we get upset because we think something's going the way it shouldn't go, only to learn later that there was a lot more going on in that situation that we didn't know about and we had no way of knowing that was really driving the situation? It happens to me all the time. So how did Job show his faith? Well, first of all, what is faith? Hebrews 11:1, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. So faith is believing in something that we can't see. Well, he lived it, first of all. He had faith in God in spite of all this. His wife said, curse God and die. And he wouldn't do it. 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we walk by faith and not by sight. He endured testing. Through all of this testing, the boils and everything, he endured it. James 1:2-3 says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials in various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Now, I don't think Job enjoyed it. He probably didn't count it as joy or happiness or anything. He was probably miserable. But when it was over, I think he probably had a greater understanding and a greater appreciation for what God had blessed him with. And through it all, he was focused. Set your minds on the things above and not the things that are on this earth. He was focused on loving and serving God. And whatever God did to him as a result, he didn't lay that at God's feet. He questioned it. But at the end, he still had faith in God. So ultimately, faith is trust. And we're back where we began. Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Because contentment is not found in what you have. That's folly. It's not found in what you do if your focus isn't on Christ. And it's not found in what you believe unless that faith is in God's Word. Because what you have, what you do, and what you believe, there is no contentment unless that contentment is found in Christ. So what do we do with that? What does that mean? How does that guide our lives? We have a plan of salvation. God has given us a hope. He's given us a way out of what we deserve. As Lee prayed earlier, we come with sin on our hands. We're all sinners. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. None of us deserve to be saved. None of us. But through Jesus' blood and his perfect sacrifice, he gave us a way that if we believe in him and obey his word, and if we're baptized into his church, we can be saved. We'll now have an invitation song if you'd like to respond as we stand and sing.